Well, good morning, church. And I know a while ago when we started going through Ephesians, we talked about these two groups that Paul really was dealing with in the early church. These Jewish Christians who felt like these Gentile believers essentially needed to become Jewish before they could be truly a Christian, and then obviously the Gentile believers. And so here we see Paul addressing these Jewish Christians who are in their mind, no, you need to be circumcised in order to truly be a Christian. It says, so then remember that at one time you were Gentiles in the flesh, called the uncircumcised by those called the circumcised, which is done in the flesh by human hands. At that time you were without Christ, excluded from the citizenship of Israel, and foreigners to the covenants of promise, without hope and without God in the world. But now in Christ Jesus, you who were far away have been brought near by the blood of Christ. For he is our peace, who made both groups one and tore down the dividing wall of hostility. In his flesh he made of no effect the law consisting of commands and expressed in regulations, so that he might create in himself one new man from the two, resulting in peace. What that's saying is kind of like what we talked about yesterday. It's not what Jesus did on the cross plus anything else. It's just what Jesus did on the cross. And when he did that, he tore down this wall that these Jewish Christians were trying to put back up, that no, there's other things required for salvation. There's not. It's just putting your faith and trust in Jesus Christ and who he is and what he did. Now, I think it's important for us to remember, kind of like what Paul's saying to these Jewish Christians. As believers today, it's easy for us to judge people for their actions, especially people who aren't followers of Jesus. And what's interesting about that is, why do we expect someone who's not following after Jesus to do things that would be following after him? To live like a Christian? That doesn't make sense. They're doing exactly what the world would expect them to do or is telling them to do. And for us, it's easy to forget that we haven't always been where we're at either. We look at others and start judging them for what they're doing, and when we do that, we're putting ourselves on a pedestal that we shouldn't be. The only difference between a believer and someone who's not a believer is the fact that we recognize how desperately we need Jesus. We're still sinners. We still mess up. We're trying not to, but at the end of the day, we still mess up all the time. But we recognize Jesus paid that debt. We've put our faith in him, so our debt is paid in full. We want others to experience that same thing. It's not like we actually view ourselves as any better than others, or we shouldn't. And so I want to challenge you, how do we look at people that aren't living the way that we think they should? If they're not a follower of Jesus Christ, we need to stop expecting them to live like they are. That just doesn't make sense. But we also need to try and extend that same grace. Like we talked about yesterday, living out our faith in hopes that other people would see God at work in us and want to experience that same thing. We'll see you again tomorrow.